Welcome to the Somm Demand Tasting Studio. Here we're doing a trio, Sangioveses today, joined with my mentor, friend, and wine director of Aqua Restaurant in San Francisco, Gianpaolo Paterlini. I'm David Roby, and thank you for watching today. So Sangiovese, it's a well-known grape, but why are we showcasing just this grape today?
Well, Sangiovese is one of Italy's most important red grapes. A lot of people are familiar with the examples that come from Tuscany, but you'll find some really beautiful wines in neighboring regions like Umbria, Emilia-Romagna, and Marche as well. It's a grape that can age really, really well. We're drinking younger wines today, but if you can cellar Sangiovese properly, it'll reward you with really beautiful drinking wines in 20, 30 years after the date. And stylistically, it varies a lot. It's really versatile. You can find wines that are kind of bright and fresh, really dark and rich. There tends to be a good amount of acidity, good amount of tannin. So just really intense, complex, balanced wines.
Yeah. And the three that we have today, they, are definitely showcasing their areas and their terroir and their, where they're from. But I find that you and I tend to be drinking a more similar style of Sangiovese within those regions. Can you talk to us more about that and maybe if these wines are in that way as well?
Certainly, yeah. We tend to like purity in general here at Somm Demand, and we find that all three of these Sangioveses represent the lighter, fresher, more elegant version of their appellations. Like we said, these wines can be very dark and rich, but it's not the style we're trying to showcase today.
But within that, these appellations and these wines are true to their
Absolutely
typicity, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on, Sangiovese's astringency in a positive way. That's what it provides. But is there a typicity to look for in Sangiovese more broad than just those, tannins?
Flavor-wise, you're always going to find bright red fruit. It tends to be sometimes a little bit sour cherry going on in the mouth. There's lots of acidity, which kind of accentuates that bright, tart, sour feel. And that's really nicely balanced by depth and tannin. For some people who might not be familiar with Sangiovese, the acidity can be a little bit jarring at first. It really is quite bright, kind of makes your mouth water. Mm-hmm. But personally, I think that when wines have that kind of acidity, I want to drink more of them. I just want to keep going back.
Yeah, and the three that we have today, the Castellare Chianti Classico 2020 Somm Demand, we sell that for $28 a bottle. It's definitely that brighter, fresher style that we're showcasing here. This Chianti Classico tends to be that way. Wine number 2 is going to be the Mutiliana Sangiovese from Romagna, from Emilia-Romagna. And that is $42 on our website, sommdemand.com. And then last, we're going to go to a Brunello de Montalcino from Caprili, 2017. And that is $60 from Somm Demand. But if you buy the trio, obviously you get that discount as well as a nice little tasting seminar led by Gianpaolo and myself. So wine number 1, Castellare, right? As I took a sip and put my nose in this, it's just so high toned and so perfumed. Chianti is something that we hear a lot, right? A lot of people visited Chianti, talk to us about, what this means on the label or Chianti Classico.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's important to understand that Chianti is both the name of a place and the name of a wine. Chianti in general is in central Tuscany, and the Chianti Classico zone is really the oldest area of the appellation. It's the heart of it, and it sits roughly in between Florence and Siena. It's made up of a bunch of different villages. This one's from Castellare, which is towards the western edge of the appellation. It tends to make wines that are pretty bright and fresh, a little bit more fruity and elegant. And I think it's important to touch on what can go into Chianti Classico as well.
Yeah, it's like DOCG, which Chianti is just a DOC. We won't get into too much of that, but Chianti does not have to be 100% Sangiovese, and Chianti Classico does not either.
No, the history of Chianti Classico is actually blending. Until the 90s, actually, you had to include white grapes in the blend. So Sangiovese is always the dominant grape. These days, they're allowed up to 20% blending varieties. Some of them indigenous grapes like Canaiolo and Colorino. There's a little touch of Canaiolo in this one here. Gives a little bit of fruit and color to the Sangiovese. But people can also blend Cabernet and Merlot and Syrah and other foreign varieties. Those tend to make wines that are a little bit less recognizable as Sangiovese and Chianti Classico. Just a little bit of Cabernet goes a long way in making the wine feel darker and heavier. Sangiovese we feel is best expressed as a more elegant variety that's kind of closer to Pinot Noir on the spectrum in terms of its freshness and elegance. So if you add too much Cabernet Merlot, you're not really going to taste so much of the place in the Sangiovese. You're going to get sometimes really well-made wines, but we feel they're less representative.
I'm really getting a lot of that kind of bright cherry that you mentioned as a common note of Sangiovese. The tannins I feel, but not as much of that kind of earthy, savory tone that Sangiovese can run to. Really has that nice freshness. When I see Chianti Classico, I see that it's often a more affordable wine. And if you watched our previous tastings, maybe you've seen the Barberas, definitely one of Gianpaolo's kind of safe havens on a wine list. Is Chianti Classico offering a lot of quality when you purchase it blindly, or?
Absolutely not. Chianti Classico can make some fantastic wines, but like we touched on, it's really hard to know what you're getting. First of all, there are just so many producers that are just making mass quantities of kind of industrialized Chianti Classico that just isn't of very high quality. If you can find a wine of good quality, you still don't know if it's going to be pure Sangiovese or if there's going to be some Cabernet Merlot blended in. So stylistically, it's a little bit of a minefield.
A lot of a minefield. Yeah, so just to bring it in, I mean, we've got the area of Tuscany within Italy, and then we have the Chianti zone, and then we have an area Chianti Classico, and that's specifically where the DOCG of Chianti Classico comes from. So it's a little more specific when you buy a Chianti Classico than a Chianti.
Yes,
Right.
And a little bit more expensive.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little more expensive? Slightly more reliable, or still not more reliable?
Not really.
Not really. Fair enough. And there are some other good Chianti appellations in Tuscany, but Chianti Classico is definitely what we wanted to showcase today. And Castellina, you touched on, is where Castellare is from. Is there anything specific to that area that gives us, is there the vineyard certain elevation, or Castellare's winemaking? Like what gives not just the fact that it's Chianti Classico, this light, fresh expression? What is Castellare doing, or what is Castellina giving?
Yeah, so the acidity comes partly from the elevation. These vineyards are about 400 meters, so relatively high for Chianti Classico, and you can get that real bright, brisk acidity from that relatively cool climate. In the cellar, they don't do too much. The wine's fermented in stainless steel, really to accentuate that brightness. It's aged in used barriques, so small barrels, but nothing new. So they're really not trying to impart flavor. The barrels help give the wine a little bit of color. Smaller oak helps to kind of fix the color of a wine. But yeah, not having flavor, it's just an aging vessel.
A little more oxygen as well to the aging process.
Exactly.
Yeah, very nice. I mean, just a pretty wine. Just so drinkable, especially for Sangiovese, which can be for if you're giving this to introducing Sangiovese to someone who's maybe more used to New World wines. Is this a safe place for you in the restaurant to introduce Castellare? Is this where you start?
This is a good one to start with for sure.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go on to wine number 2, the Emilia Romagna Sangiovese, Ibbola. Man, just right off the bat, much darker, kind of spicier nose.
A lot more savory.
Yeah.
A little more earthy.
And do you want to talk a little about Emilia Romagna as an area, and then?
Sure. So Emilia Romagna is an appellation just a little bit northeast of Tuscany. It's known actually more for its food than it is for its wine, especially historically. You've got things like mortadella and prosciutto, Parmigiano Reggiano, balsamico di Modena. You've got all these amazing
Your father
products as well. Yes. The
no,
wines.
He's not very palatable.
The wines in the past have been a little bit more on the rustic side of the spectrum. There was not enough investment in the wineries in the past few decades, but that's starting to change. We're seeing some younger, newer wineries, a few just in the last decade or so, including this one here. Mm-hmm. This is a former wine writer, wine critic, who really wanted to kind of raise the bar when it comes to the wines of Romagna. It's eastern Emilia Romagna. This area called Mogdiliana is just a little bit south of Bologna. It's close to the Tuscan border, actually, and very, very high up, about 600 meters elevation for these two vineyards.
So a little higher than the Castellare.
Yeah, so despite the fact that Emilia Romagna in general is a little bit warmer than Chianti Classico and can make very dark, oaky wines if that's what the producers want to do, there are little subzones that make a brighter, fresher style like this.
Yeah, brighter, fresher style for Emilia Romagna. But in the spectrum of Sangiovese and Castellare, just a little bit more. I mean, you can color,
Always a
smell.
little bit more tannin, always a little bit more of a savory, kind of wild, earthy flavor going on. These vineyards are really isolated. They're completely surrounded by forests, so they're not in an area that's widely planted. That isolation really makes this wine unique.
And does this have a similar fermentation process to the Castellare? And is the winemaking similar, same?
Not too dissimilar. The wine is also fermented in stainless steel. It spends up to 40 days on the skin, so they're doing a little bit more extraction, trying to get a little more power and structure out of this than Castellare is with their Chianti. Then it doesn't see any oak, actually. That's the one thing that really sets us apart from the other two. The aging is all done in cement, so no wood involved in the process at all. Cement still breathes, but a little bit less than oak, and certainly doesn't impart any flavor.
Yeah, really get those more earthy aromas, a little more dusty, and then even a little more earthy flavors. And so I guess in addition to Emilia Romagna kind of giving you that quality, it's probably a little bit to do with that. I think you said 40-day maceration on the skins.
Certainly.
Yeah, which gives you a little more kind of
a lot more depth, a lot more power. Still has that bright red fruit that Castellare has, but it finishes a lot longer, deeper, a little bit more complex and serious. Makes you think a little more. Castellare, Chianti, you can just drink it easily without thinking too much. This one's a little more pensive.
Right. And while this wine isn't crazy expensive, it's not so much of this is made, correct?
No, it's a really, really small production. There are fewer than 200 cases made for the world. Only 6 came to California. It's really, really limited production.
Yeah, and I think just from 2 vineyards, 4 hectares.
Yeah, very small.
Very, very small. Beautiful. Third wine, Brunello de Montalcino. Brunello, as we more commonly hear it, but the full name of the appellation, Brunello Montalcino, Caprili being the winemaker. Is this always the richest style of Sangiovese or the richer style of Sangiovese?
It tends to be. So Montalcino is a hilltop town about 45 minutes south of Siena. So compared to Castellare, that's about an hour and 10, hour 15 minutes south. So it's significantly warmer. It's an area with a lot less history too. Well, Chianti goes back for centuries. Just about 70 years ago, that you could count on 2 hands how many producers were making Montalcino wines. It's really seen a huge uptick in interest and investment in the last few decades. It's really one of Italy's most popular and most expensive wines these days. Generally speaking, I'd say the quality is a little more consistent than Chianti Classico. Part of that has to do with the fact that it's 100% Sangiovese. There's no blending allowed in Montalcino.
Always.
So
Always.
You know what you're getting is pure Sangiovese. No blending, nothing to kind of make you second guess what's in the glass.
Yeah. And Caprili itself, this bottling from Caprili, pardon me, is a more elegant style of Brunello. And I know that oak can sometimes bring a little more richness to a wine. So are they dialing back on the new oak, or is it where they're located in Montalcino? Because it's a hilltop town with many different expositions.
It's both. So the classic part of Montalcino is right around the town itself, primarily on the north slope. It's a little bit cooler. These days, some of the most popular wines from Montalcino come from the south. And even though it's just a 15-minute drive, the temperature swing can be 10 to 15 degrees just in that drive. Oh. So the south makes really ripe, dark, powerful wines relative to what you find in the north. Caprili is kind of in between. They're in an area called Tavernelle, which is just a little southwest of Montalcino itself. And it's an east-west valley that opens up to the west. So they get a little bit of a coastal influence that the rest of Montalcino doesn't. So that really contributes to the brightness. In the cellar, they're doing things real hands-off. They're using very large old oak casks for aging, again, fermenting in stainless steel. The casks they're using are literally hundreds of times bigger than the little barrels that Castellare is using. So despite there not being much oak flavor in the Castellare, there's even less influence in this. And you can see that partly in the color. This has the most bricking, the most brown color of the 3 wines.
Don't leave me. Yeah, while this is richer, I feel a little less of the tannins maybe sticking out, which is, compared to the Emilia Romagna, I guess, stylistic common thread in Brunello versus Emilia Romagna, or is that more just this wine being not touched with new oak and things like that?
No, in general, the wines in Montalcino tend to be a little bit riper and deeper. So the tannins, while substantial, are often covered up by the fruit of the wine. You get enough concentration and enough depth in the wines that the tannins are there, but you don't really feel them. They don't stick out as much as they might in something from Romagna.
Yeah, and that's because Brunello, Montalcino, pardon me, as a town is further south than Chianti Classico. So we're still in Tuscany, and rather than being in the Chianti zone, we're further south in Brunello Montalcino.
Yep. Farther south you get, generally speaking, the warmer it gets. So Montalcino definitely benefits from that sun.
About 45 south of Siena. Yeah, and so I've really picked up on that common thread of that red fruit, right? Even though it got richer and darker as we move through the wines, that kind of thread between all these Sangioveses is really that red fruit. The acidity stayed high through all of them, even as we got to riper ones as well.
Yeah, despite how dark and rich the Brunello is compared to the Chianti, it still makes my mouth water.
Yeah.
It's a much more substantial wine, but it still keeps me coming back for more.
And so are you opening these wines for the same food, or are you doing, because this one's lighter and fresher, you may have this with that, or Brunello is more suited for this? When are you opening these wines? When are you drinking these wines, other than always?
The style of Chianti that I like tends to be something that I can drink always, with or without food. Don't tell Italians that. They never drink without food. But I really love how the Chianti is just really approachable, soft, easy drinking. I always have this wine at home. It's a really good go-to with something like pizza. You don't have to think about it too much. Just easy to smash a bottle and not even realize how quickly it went down. Romagna tends to be a little bit harder to pair with, just because of the acidity and the tannins. They both kind of jump out. This is going to go better with something a little bit richer, maybe a pasta kind of dish, like a red sauce, something with some kind of that tart, bright sweet tomato flavor going on. Maybe a little meat in there as well. Something like a Mutiliana, a little spice perhaps could go with that too. And the Brunellos tend to go with more of a main course, more of a braised meat kind of dish. In Montalcino, around Montalcino, there are a lot of wild boar. They call them cinghiale, and that's something they enjoy with the wines very regularly.
I almost even got like a smokiness to the wine as you were talking about. The boar and flavors that might go well with that. Beautiful. Are there any sendaways, for the people who joined today? Any, last minute words of advice when shopping for or drinking these Sangioveses?
I think the biggest thing is don't write off Sangiovese. I think a lot of people have, because Chianti Classico's uneven quality and reputation over the years. But the wines can be fantastic. Just ask questions. Talk to us. Talk to anyone else you trust about wine. There are really good wines out there that you'll enjoy a lot.
Yeah, I'd say as we share a lot of the same wines. We drink a lot together and think about what we're drinking. And price is always a huge thing. And I'd say in the last few years, with everything going up in price and Northern Italian wines, Burgundy, all these things kind of being more and more expensive, I find myself opening a lot of Sangiovese at home because of the quality it delivers based on the price.
Especially Chianti Classico. I mean, this is an area where you can buy wines retail for under $30 and drink them now or age them for 30 years. And there's really no better value than that in Italy.
Yeah, that's probably the most biggest takeaway for me in Sangiovese in the last couple of years is how much quality you get for the dollar and how delicious they can be when they're done in this young, fresh style.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you on the other side. Cheers, Gianpaolo.
Cheers.